What sort of regulatory framework might lead to a more serious American media, one less beholden to infotainment? Good question. The media, and I'm referring to print, broadcast, digital, is another critical mediating institution acting as the primary conduit of information transference between the government and the public, and between the public and the government, and among the citizens themselves. In a free society, the media is expected to perform several vital democratic functions. The media is supposed to inform the public, report on events, government actions, policy debates, etc. Supposed to be watchdogs, investigate government officials and institutions to expose wrongdoing, corruption, or incompetence. This assumes an adversarial relationship between the press and power. Agenda setting. Media influences which issues the public considers important by deciding which stories to cover and how prominently. There's big responsibility there, obviously. And then simply providing a forum, offering a platform for diverse viewpoints and public debates through its function, although that function is increasingly contested. The media landscape has changed dramatically in recent decades and even in your lifetime, I'm sure. We've shifted from print overwhelmingly to digital overwhelmingly. I watched it all happen. Shift from newspapers and broadcast networks to cable news, then online sources, blogs, and now social media. The rise and re-rise of partisan media, which has flared up from time to time. Think about yellow journalism in the early 20th century, the explosion of the Maine, the Spanish-American War, the proliferation of major news outlets with clear ideological slants, like the papers of old, where liberal folks watch MSNBC and more conservative folks watch Fox News, etc. It's relatively new, or resurgent rather. Citizen journalism is a huge change. Individuals can now report and disseminate information outside of traditional channels. I think of the live streamer Unicorn Riot during the George Floyd protests, just how that became our source of information. Someone who used to live in Minneapolis, trying to find out what was happening on the ground. Ditto, January 6th, 2021, I went to Twitter. Twitter was the only place I could find reliable information about what was happening at the Capitol. There's also AI and misinformation, which is a new angle for these discussions in these lectures. High fidelity information, perspectives, and opinions can be summoned and published in seconds using artificial intelligence. Where's the line between my brain and the machine? In both, in terms of what makes it onto my screen and what I put out into the world through my smart device, my smartphone, my smartwatch, soon my smart glasses, right? There's also economic pressures. The decline of traditional news revenue models, right? People stopped watching local TV, leading to newsroom cuts, focus on sensationalism, clickbait stories, infotainment. The blurring of corporate sponsored segments on the news leaves us potentially vulnerable to ownership influence of the media. I know that 60 Minutes currently at the time of this recording is going through a big brouhaha regarding their internal politics and their commitment to truth versus making money, right? The contemporary media environment faces a ton of criticism. There's obvious media bias, ideological bias, sensationalism, focus on conflict over substance, potential biased framing of multiple issues. Distinguishing objective reporting from opinion or advocacy is incredibly difficult. It's what Americans are arguing about every single day. So-called fake news and misinformation. The ease with which false or misleading information can spread online, sometimes deliberately, that's disinformation, erodes trust and makes informed citizenship challenging. There's been two times since 2016 that I've been flatly fooled by something online that I found out about later. I only found out about one instance that definitely shaped my political thinking, or rather my thinking about what was possible politically regarding the 2016 election, only during the release of the Twitter files in front of Congress by Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone and others did I find out that this thing that I had seen on social media on a website called the Drudge Report was in fact a bought Russian poll. Years later did I discover this fact, and that poll and the results of that poll definitely shaped my thinking about the 2016 election. It was totally fabricated. It was an advertisement. The concentration of ownership of all these media companies has been significant. It's created all sorts of echo chambers fueled by social media algorithms, right? Where increasingly we're shown the news that most resonates with us, generates the most clicks, generates the most screen time, and what that is, the news is very different than what your neighbor is seeing. There's an overall decline in investigative journalism. It's only independent people like YouTubers doing any real independent journalism, it would seem. In a lot of regards, the costly nature of in-depth reporting and the lack of the ability to see if it's going to be profitable for a news company means they don't do deep investigative reporting into local issues so much anymore. They cover the events, they move on. And then there's an impact on politics. Media coverage heavily influences the campaigns, how we perceive the campaigns, shapes public perceptions of major candidates, and it can fuel political polarization, right? Regulation. Media regulation in the United States is relatively limited due to First Amendment protections and the expansion of some of those rights in recent decades. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, regulates broadcast media, radio, TV bandwidth signals, regarding licensing, obscenity, ownership rules. We've seen Netflix and other things sort of take a lot of steam out of traditional broadcast journalism and all of the rules that go with it in terms of obscenity, things like that. Past regulations like the Fairness Doctrine, requiring broadcasters to present controversial issues fairly, have been abandoned through the use of new media. Debates continue over issues like net neutrality issues, regulating internet service providers, and potential regulation of social media platforms, i.e., the banning of TikTok, which is always being debated, regarding content moderation and algorithms. But none of the major parties seems to have sort of figured out a way to do this in a way that preserves democracy but keeps voters happy. And so until someone lands on a good idea, we're kind of stuck in media no man's land, in a sense, all pursuing our own little stories on our own little internet devices with all the freedom and all of the consequences that brings.